Dr. Curtis Austin is an associate professor in the Department of History at the University of Oregon. Curtis is the author of the book Up Against the Wall: Violence in the Making and Unmaking of the Black Panther Party. He is currently working on a second book, also about the Black Panther Party. Following his talk, there will be a Q&A session with Curtis and former Black Panther member Harold Taylor.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. I actually just wanted to stand up here because it's fun, but I don't think I can stand so close to the machine. As Marcia said, I'll be talking about the Black Panther Party tonight. We okay with the sound? Everybody can hear me? Okay, good. But really quickly, I just want to explain that the Black Panther Party sort of fits into this larger movement. All of you have heard of the Civil Rights Movement, and more likely than not of the Black Power Movement. But long before 1966, Black people were working to achieve their freedom, to work out their liberation. And we're talking not just registering people to vote, not just trying to desegregate lunch counters, but real freedom, right? Serious types of freedom. And the Black Panther Party kind of comes along and joins this Black Power movement. And I just want people to know that it's one, and believe it or not, one of thousands of organizations that are part of the Black Power movement. And it's actually one of the smaller organizations. And so the question becomes, why does it get all of the attention that it eventually gets? All right, so hopefully I will get to the answer to that question in the next 50 minutes, or however much time I have. And I'm not gonna read that slide to you. It's been up there for a long time. And you should have read it by now, but as I talk, I want you to be thinking about these 4 points, right? And there's, like I say to my students, there's something up there in bold, right? If it's in bold, it's on the test. So keep that in mind. All of it's important, but the bold piece is extremely important. So without going back into all of the history, because I do want to fit in quite a bit of information, just want to tell you that the party starts as a result of a guy named Mark Comfort who goes down to Lowndes County, Alabama to help out. Many of you probably lived through this, to help out with Hurricane Betsy, which before Katrina was one of the most powerful hurricanes in American history. And he actually took a bunch of clothes and food and other types of things from Oakland down to Alabama and Mississippi, distributed these things, and he runs up on this group called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which is trying to get Black people the right to vote and the right to hold office, and so on and so forth. And he picks up a flyer from that organization, and he comes back to Oakland, and he gets with his cousin, Huey P. Newton. Huey Percy Newton, who's also from Louisiana. And Huey Newton and Bobby Seale had been trying to figure out a name for this new organization that they wanted to start. They were 2 college students there in Oakland at Merritt College, and they had joined a number of different organizations, none of which satisfied them. And so they met up with Mark Comfort. Mark Comfort explained to them what these Black people down in Lowndes County were doing, and it's essentially they were registering to vote. But prior to that point, when they tried to register to vote, they were either run out of town, beaten, killed, fired from their jobs. They registered to vote, and they took their guns to the polls with them. And of course, they got the vote. And they actually took over all of the offices in Lowndes County. Black people were 90% of that county, and for 140 years, nobody Black had held office in that county. When the Black Panther Party in Lowndes County registered all these voters, then you start getting a tax assessor, a sheriff, a mayor, or this and that. And so Huey Newton is reading this pamphlet, and he sees this animal on the pamphlet. He says, "What is that?" He says, "That's cat." "Well, it's kind of a cat. It's a panther. It's a Black panther." He says, "Well, that's what we're going to name our organization." And that's what they did. It was as simple and uncomplicated as that. Essentially, they stole the name and the logo, right? And I say that in full truth because you've probably heard there's something called the new Black Panther Party, right? That has been operating in the last, decade or so maybe. And the old Black Panther Party has sued the new Black Panther Party 3 times for violation of copyright. And every time it gets down to the wire, the judge says, actually, that's not yours, you stole that. And so they're never able to sue them. But that's what it was all about in terms of the name. The actual philosophy behind that name is that they kind of did a little background research on the panther, and they found out that panthers are very reclusive. They don't hang out even with other panthers. They hang out with themselves, and they just kind of feed themselves. And if you don't bother them, they don't bother you. But if you do bother a panther, then you got trouble on your hands. And it kind of fit with what they were talking about, because some of the things that are happening in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia are also happening in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. Prior to October of 1966, in the 10 months prior to October of 1966, 7 Black people are killed in the San Francisco Bay Area. And these Black people range from the age of 12 to the age of 92. It was a 92-year-old man in Palo Alto, California, who's killed by the police for sitting on a stoop, actually. They just figured he wasn't supposed to be there. They beat him and he died. And again, these other people, or mostly young people, but the idea was we need to do something about this. The Black community has a lot of problems, but just imagine, 7 Mike Browns, Eric Garner, month after. We can kind of take it because it's this year, maybe a couple, 2 or 3, as far as CNN is concerned, right? And then you get another one next year and you have a rally and you cool down, but just imagine month in, month out, month in, month out, over a 10-month period, all these things kind of taking place. And so they decided they wanted to address some of the issues in the Black community. And here are some of the issues they decided to work on. They went around the community and started asking people, what are the problems you would like to see solved? What do you like to see in your community? And this took about 6 or 8 weeks. And so they kind of collated all of their answers, and they came up with the Black Panther Party 10-point platform and program. And obviously they wanted to be free, right? People say we want some freedom, and we want to determine what's going on in our community as far as the schools and whatnot is concerned. And you can see there the different types of issues they decided they wanted to take on. Obviously, employment was very important to them. The higher up the issue, the more important it is. Obviously, freedom is number 1, employment number 2, and so on and so forth. But the thing that they became known for was point number 7. This idea that they wanted an immediate end to the police brutality and murder of Black people in their communities. And they thought that they could address all these issues by doing different things. And I'm not going to talk about what all those different things were. I'm going to focus here on point number 7 this evening, and maybe a couple of other things too later on. But they thought that if they just followed the law, Huey Newton was in law school, going to law school at night, and he learned that anybody over the age of 16 can have a weapon as long as they weren't, what the law said, menacing anybody with it. You can't just point it at people, but you could walk around with a loaded weapon, and that's legal. And he thought if people armed themselves and patrolled the police, that the police would stop murdering Black people. Well, the party is founded in October 1966. Between October 1966 and October 1967, 0 Black people killed in the Oakland Bay Area. No shootouts, no nothing. It's just people kind of understood, hey, those guys got guns, right? So what they would do is they would load up in their cars and follow the police around the Oakland Bay Area. And when these people, when the police pulled people over, The Panthers would pull over behind them, and they'd stand the law required them to stand actually 20 feet away, but they actually decided they would stand 100 feet away. And so they would yell, "Hey, brother, hey, sister, we're Black Panther Party, and we're here to protect you. We're going to make sure you don't get, brutalized or murdered, and if you wind up going to jail, we'll come in and bail you out." And of course, the black person is like, who in the world is that? And the police are like, well, who the hell are you? But they would turn around and check out the scene and see all of these black people, men and women with weapons, and they wouldn't actually do anything about it. But usually what would happen is they'd go down to the police department and bail the person out if they were arrested. And this is an image of the first recruit of the Black Panther Party, Bobby Hutton. He's 15 years old when he joined the party in 1966. He's going to be the first to die in April of 1968 in a shootout that takes place. It was kind of ill-advised, and I probably take count of it was a very ill-advised action, and Bobby Hutton actually winds up being killed. But you see him outside of the jail. He's waiting for the person to be bailed out, and they are interacting with the cops time and time again, over and over. Every time they arrest somebody, they would go down, pay the $50, the $25, bail them out, and this is how they would gain recruits. People would say, well, thank you, I'll join your party or what have you. And they would go and try and put up like a street light at a place where there might have been a lot of accidents, or children trying to cross the street might have been killed or injured on their way to school. And they do little things around the community to ensure that folks knew who they were, but they didn't do enough. And so almost a year went by, and it was just a few people in their community who knew who they were. Well, the police got sick and tired of them following them around, so they went to their elected official, Don Mulford, and said, hey, you got to do something about these guys following us around. And Don Mulford said, all right, I'll write a bill. It'll become a law. They won't do that anymore. And that's exactly what he did. He was the local assemblyman, went up to the state capitol, got with his cohorts there and said, we got to stop these Panthers from following the police. And the way to do it is to pass this law. The Panthers decided they were going to go and oppose that law. In California at this time, there were gun rights groups that were always going to the Sacramento state capitol, demanding their rights, asking for this. So it wasn't uncommon to see people walking around with guns. It's pretty uncommon to see black people walking around with guns. And so just imagine there's this caravan going from Oakland to Sacramento. It's about an 80-mile drive. And they get there, and it's against the law to have a loaded weapon in a vehicle, in a moving vehicle. So just imagine this caravan of people pulling up in front of the State House, piling out of their cars, and loading these weapons, right? Ronald Reagan is the governor of California at the time, and he's talking to this little group of 4-H students, group of middle school students. And the middle school students see these guys with these guns, and they kind of gravitate over there, and Reagan sees these guys with these guns, and he kind of, he goes the other way. And somebody actually caught that on tape, and Reagan is actually pretty fast, so he was pretty good. But they actually go inside the Capitol, but none of them have actually ever been out of Oakland, right? Much less to Sacramento, much less inside the Capitol, so they're immediately lost. And they don't know where the viewing gallery is. That's what they all just want to go there, watch them debate this bill, and then they're going to go home, right? Well, it didn't quite happen that way, because they were asking people where the viewing gallery was. This one reporter who was just snapping away, and in fact, that's his picture there on the left, this reporter. It's like the viewing gallery is there. Turns out that wasn't the viewing gallery. That was the assembly floor, right? And so I can't see a bunch of little kids in the room. So I'll tell you what this guy said, right? They're in there discussing this bill, and he goes, who in the hell are these niggas with these guns? And he takes off too. He doesn't wait around for the answer, right? So they're actually escorted off the gallery floor and brought out, and just make sure this is not actually an illegal gun. Nothing happens to them. Reagan is like, all right, what'd y'all do with those guys? He said, oh, well, they're gone now. It's not that big a deal. So what do you mean they're gone? Go get them. Like they were just up here with these guns, and they had to explain to the governor that guns weren't a problem, in the State House. So they actually didn't have to do anything. But what they did do, because of all these cameras and the cameras, actually the video cameras, not just the click cameras, the video cameras. They got it on TV, and Bobby Seale, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, actually reads what Huey Newton calls the executive mandate number 1. And it's really long, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing to you, but just imagine this going on. This is Bobby Seale actually reading Executive Mandate number 1. He says, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense calls upon the American people in general, and black people in particular, to take careful note of the racist California legislature, which is now considering legislation aimed at keeping the black people disarmed and powerless. At the very same time, the racist police agencies throughout the country are intensifying the terror, brutality, murder, and repression of black people. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense believes that the time has come for black people to arm themselves against this terror before it is too late. The pending Mulford Act brings the hour of doom one step nearer. A people who have suffered so much for so long at the hands of a racist society must draw the line somewhere. We believe that the black communities of America must rise up as one to halt the progression of a trend that leads inevitably to their total destruction. So I didn't do it nearly as good as Bobby Seale would have done, but just imagine him reading that with fervor, it being caught on camera, and you're sitting at home watching the 6 o'clock news, and that's what you see. So this is a really small coterie of people. There are probably 30 people in the party at this time, maybe not even that much. Folks watching this at home, it's shown all over the state of California, spreads throughout the West, and eventually over the next couple of days, they're showing it on the East Coast, down south. Almost overnight, they go from an organization with 30 people to thousands. It just mushrooms, blows up almost overnight because people have been watching Martin Luther King give these speeches. They've been watching the Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerners of the world die. They saw Emmett Till get killed, and they're wondering, what in the world is this civil rights movement delivering us? We've got the Civil Rights Act, we've got the Voting Rights Act, we've got this law and that law, and still we've got the same problems we started out with in the beginning. So here's an organization that says, we're going to do something about these issues and we're going to defend ourselves at the same time. And people were like, that's the organization I want to join, right? That's good, but it's also going to become a problem because everybody literally and their mama wants to join the Black Panther Party. And some of those individuals are not going to be all of that cool. And so people all over the country get their black berets, their black boots, their black pants, and their leather jackets. And they chose a leather jacket because everybody at the time had a leather jacket. You didn't have to have a lot of money, so that was their uniform. And people just kind of flooded into the party, as did women. As a matter of fact, women are going to become, by 1971, the majority of the people in the party. They're going to hold, by 1972, the majority of the leadership positions of people in the party. And so it's not this male-dominated organization that is supposed to be all that racist, right? And so they actually have to figure out what to do with all these people. Right, well, they got this 10-point platform and program, and so what they do is start, again, go around the community, figure out what the problems were. They had to, they read this study that said children found it difficult to learn because they were hungry. Very hard to figure out fractions if your stomach's growling, right? Very hard to figure out how to diagram that sentence. I don't know if people still do that, but we did it in my school. So they decided they were going to do something to help the kids learn. They were concerned about the future of their community, so they started a free breakfast program. And what they do is go around their community, ask the people who own the businesses, usually white people who own the businesses, would you donate to this program? Milk, bread, money, whatever you have. And invariably, people said, yes, absolutely. And they had breakfast programs that went all across the country. And by 1970, the Black Panther Party was serving about 25,000 people every day in these free breakfast programs. And they had a long range of other programs. One of them was a free health program. We've been talking about healthcare a lot in the news these days, but that's another problem in the black community. Black people couldn't afford to go to doctors, hospitals. I mean, now today you can go to a hospital whether you have money or not, right? And they got to treat you. Not necessarily the case in the 1960s, right? And so these members of the Black Panther Party would go down to the local hospital, talk to the doctors, talk to the nurses, and say, here are the problems we're having. Will you help us solve them? And invariably, they would say yes. And about 9 times out of 10, all of these doctors and nurses would be white, right? They would say, this is something that I want to do, something that I want to support. In fact, they told them about a problem that was ravaging the black community, and that was sickle cell anemia. It's a blood disease that 90% or so of the people who have sickle cell anemia are black, right? Comes out of Africa, and if you're a white person, you got sickle cell anemia, then we're probably cousins, right? But this disease is killing people, right? It's killing people, and the federal government at this point is spending about $500,000 on the disease. Well, the Black Panther Party launches a sickle cell anemia research project, and Richard Nixon actually mentions it in his State of the Union speech in 1972, and today, very few people die from sickle cell anemia. It still exists, didn't get completely wiped out, kind of like polio, although polio still exists a little bit. But had they not done that, it would continue to ravage the community. And so these doctors and nurses would show up at people's homes, or they would come down to the local community center, be tested. If they had something like, if they needed surgery, obviously the Black Panther Party couldn't do that. And they'd refer them to places where doctors would agree to perform surgery for free. And so they were doing all of these various things to help out the black community. The problem is, this is getting on the nerves of members of the federal government. And one of the primary members of the federal government, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, sees this as a threat. He sees this as completely different from the NAACP, completely different from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, completely different from the Congress of Racial Equality. This organization actually is not just talking about black people and black problems. They're talking about the class issue in the United States. They're talking about capitalism in the United States. And in fact, I talked about these wealthy business owners donating to the programs, but they also begin to pull in middle class and poor white students. Students from all of the major universities in the country are eventually going to help build the Black Panther Party. Black, white, Asian, Latinx students are going to do this. This is a problem for the federal government. So that problem is going to grow much larger after 1968 because many black people are sitting on the fence. There are 23 million black people in the country during this point in American history. There are about 100,000 of them in the movement. Right, so very small percentage. Well, in April of 1968, King is assassinated. People now are off the fence. So just like people flooded into the organization after the Sacramento incident, they flood into the organization after the assassination of Martin Luther King because they just feel, all right, King was saying, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, you know, let's work this thing out together, of course, peaceably, non-violently. King gets assassinated. Most people believe he's not assassinated by the person that's accused of his assassination. Most people believe King is killed by the government. Most black people believe that. Not sure what other people believe. However, what happens is the party is now going to burst open beyond its capacity. Like when the party first started, you'd have to fill out an application, people would check you out, and you know, if you were kind of a shady individual, then you couldn't come in. Well, after this, all you had to do was be black to get in the Black Panther Party, and that's kind of a problem, right? I got some brothers who are black that I wouldn't want in my organization. So this is going to be an issue. All over the country, you're going to start seeing chapters in Colorado, of all places, right? In New Orleans, in North Carolina, in New Jersey, in New York City. literally all over the entire country. This is a picture of members of the Black Panther Party in Seattle, Washington. This picture is actually taken in Olympia, but these are the Seattle Panthers. I didn't even know growing up in Mississippi that there were black people in Seattle, right? And not until I read about this. I mean, how did they get there? Like, I thought the Underground Railroad went the other way. So people everywhere was like, I want to join this organization and I want to do something about these problems that we're facing, because if they're willing to kill Martin Luther King, then they're willing to kill me. And so the party is actually overcapacitated. And now the FBI decides we really got to do something about it because there are too many people involved. And so there was this program called the Counterintelligence Program that actually started out in 1956 as a way to get rid of the Communist Party in the country. It was retooled right around this time to get rid of black civil rights, and in this case, black power groups. And so you can see some of its protocols. And we know that because some cool white people went into the FBI office and stole some documents and shared it with some newspapers. You might have seen the movie recently that talked about this, but this was part of those documents that they stole. They actually wanted to prevent these organizations from success. And another part of the document that I don't have in there is one of the ways they want to do this is to neutralize them. Well, neutralize is a really fancy word for killing people. And this is what the FBI is going to set out to do to the Black Panther Party. They're essentially going to take the gloves off. In the few months after the death of King, they see all these people coming in. Hoover goes to Congress and says to Congress, hey, this is a problem. If we don't do something about it soon, it's going to get out of hand. And so he actually labels the Black Panther Party, the title of this talk, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. Again, we got them encouraging kids, teaching kids to read. They got all these white people helping them out. We got to stop this thing. So they become the greatest threat, and the way they deal with the greatest threat, prior to this, they had infiltrated the party. They were tapping their phones, following them around, harassing them. The Panthers have a newspaper where they go out and sell for like a quarter every day, and people would get taken to jail for selling a newspaper without a permit, which actually is not a crime that exists, but they'd go to jail anyway. So they take the gloves off after this, and they actually start putting people in jail, running them literally out of the country, or they assassinate them. And Hoover says to his agents, and those agents say to local police departments all over the country, everything is fair now. You can actually do whatever you need to do. And one of the first people that they assassinate is the leader of the Los Angeles chapter, which at the time is the largest chapter of the Black Panther Party, about 5 times larger than the chapter in Oakland, which of course is where it was founded. But Bunchy Carter he had gone to prison, kind of like Malcolm X, read a bunch of books, became politicized, came out of prison, and actually organized this gang that he was associated with, the Slawsons, and politicized him. Said, hey, we need to stop all this nonsense and let's serve the community. So you got a bunch of angry black people who are used to doing a different kind of business, who are now interested in prosecuting the revolution. Right? There's all this talk about revolution during the mid and late 60s, and Carter comes and says to these people that he used to be in a gang with, that now we're going to be in the Black Panther Party and we're not going to be ransacking our community. As a matter of fact, what we're going to do is we're going to find out who the drug dealers are, and we're going to run them out of the community. We're going to find out who the pimps and the prostitutes are, and we're going to run them out of the community. And because of their proximity to these individuals over time, they didn't have to look very far. So what you would see is in all the communities where the Black Panther Party operated, there was no drug dealing. There was no prostitution. Like people, if there was a domestic violence issue, for example, you wouldn't call the police, you'd call the Black Panther Party. Somebody from the Black Panther Party would come and deal with the situation. Perhaps it would be a nice long chat. Perhaps not, right? But there wouldn't be any more domestic violence after that, right? And so they literally started cleaning up their communities. This guy was at the head of that. There was an instance in, I believe it was January 1969, where this gentleman, and actually the person sitting right beside him, my little green thing doesn't work, but I mean, you can see I don't have to walk up here, but I wanted to move anyway. That guy is Ron Karenga. You might know him as the person who founded Kwanzaa. That guy and Bunchy Carter were vying for the leadership of the new Black Studies program at UCLA. They were there at UCLA to discuss who was going to get the opportunity actually to choose the leader. Neither one of them were going to be the leaders. They're both students at UCLA. There's something called the High Pot program. Get it? High Pot. It was short for high potential, but I mean, I figured people in Eugene might get the High Pot, right? They were both members of the High Potential program, and they were trying to say, well, I want this guy. And Karenga was saying, no, we want this guy. There was a confrontation at UCLA, and one of the US organization members, Karenga is the leader of US, assassinates Bunchy Carter. And so you say, well, I thought you said it was the federal government. Well, you got to read the book for this because I'm running out of time, right? But in any case, the two people who do the shooting are members of the ORS organization. They wind up in San Quentin. They're the only two people who ever escaped from San Quentin. So you tell me, okay? So he's the first to go because that's the most powerful chapter. All the way across the country in Illinois, the Illinois state leader of the party is Fred Hampton. Mark Clark is the defense captain in Peoria. And they have been very good at recruiting all kinds of people. There's some poor white people in Chicago that they've brought into the Panther fray. There are all these wealthy students at the University of Chicago, some of whom are in the Students for a Democratic Society, and they're already radical and don't need to be egged on anymore. They obviously recruit lots of poor black people, but there are the Young Lords in Chicago, which is a Latino organization that they also recruit, and they're a problem. So because the gloves are off, J. Edgar Hoover creates this plan to go and assassinate Mark Clark, and they do this on December 4th, 1969. 4 o'clock in the morning, they get into AT&T trucks. They kind of look like they're at work. Drive up into this black community, knock on the door, and the person guarding the door is Mark Clark. And Mark Clark says, who is it? And they answer, Tommy. And he says, Tommy who? And the guy says, Tommy Gunn. And he starts to spray the apartment that they're staying in, and over 100 shots are shot into the apartment. The first shot hits Mark Clark in the chest, right? Goes right through his heart. He's holding a shotgun when this happens, and the shotgun he's holding goes off, shoots up through the ceiling. That's the only shot the black members of the Black Panther Party get. They go into the apartment, shoot up 8 other people. They find Fred Hampton in his bed. He's shot up, he's bleeding. They've got all the people cordoned off in the kitchen, including Fred Hampton's 8-month-old, actually it's his fiancée, and she's 8 months pregnant. And these people, and I know this because I've read the trial transcripts, they hear, is he dead? Is he gonna make it? And one guy says, he's still breathing. And they hear these 2 shots from a .45 automatic pistol, and somebody says, he's good and dead now. And that's what happens to Fred Hampton. They kill him. That's it. The party in Chicago kind of goes down the drain not very long after that. And you can see how pleased they were with their work. I mean, they've got really nice smiles on their faces. Again, there's not going to be any consequences for these murders. And so what the Black Panther Party realizes is they're going after the leadership. They're going after the people who can make the best speeches, sell the most papers, who actually lead and run the chapters. And so a lot of these people, if they don't leave or haven't been sent to jail, they start to go underground. They start, I don't want to be next, you know. It's getting to be a serious type of game. Just really quickly, in 1980, the Clark and Hampton families sue the government, and they get about $2 million for the killing of Fred Hampton. But then they come to Los Angeles, And they're looking for the rest of the leaders after Bunchy Carter. Remember, I told you it's one of the largest chapters in the country? Well, the first time in American history the SWAT team is used is in Los Angeles. They realize that these guys are filled with folks who are well trained in military tactics. And they realize you just can't go walking in saying, hey, let me arrest you. So again, this is 4 days after the murder of Fred Hampton. They show up 41st and Central in this office in LA. They kick the door open. They start spraying the place with bullets, but what they don't realize is the people aren't all asleep, right? So the people inside start shooting back. And again, I know this from reading the trial transcripts, and what they're saying as they're backing out the doors, they're shooting back, you know, which is really shocking. It's surprising because generally what happens is they don't shoot back. And actually this turns into a 4-hour gun battle. Starts at 4 o'clock in the morning, about 8 o'clock, it's over. And it lasts that long because there's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran who was in special forces who had trained the troops in Los Angeles in self-defense tactics. He had put a steel plate in the roof, for example. They dropped 2 bombs on the roof. Didn't get him out because there was that steel plate. He had put sandbags and dug a tunnel in the office. And so they were able to sustain themselves. And at the end of 4 hours, they were out of bullets. The gunfight was over. It's kind of funny because they were having this discussion about, all right, you know, we got just enough bullets that if they come in here, you know, we get one last shot, right? And everybody is talking, I'm not giving up. I'm not going out there. And they're going around, there are like 11 people in that office. They're going around, I'm not going out, and there's 2 women in the office, and they say, you know, y'all some punks. I'll go out there. And this one woman decides, you know, she just takes a t-shirt, walks outside, waves it. And of course the police are completely relieved because they're tired of getting shot at too, right? And they allow her to come out. They don't shoot her. They arrest her. They see she's being arrested, and the rest of them kind of walk out, and that's kind of the end of that business. All 11 of these people are taken to jail for attempted murder on police officers because they're shooting at them. All 11 of them are found not guilty because the jury decides that the police shot first. So it's okay to defend yourself. However, that kind of, you've heard the phrase, take the starch out of you. That was a bit much for that party, and after 1969, you don't see very much of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles anymore. It kind of goes defunct. It comes back in 1972, but it dies out for a while and comes back as something a little bit different. And so here's some of the people who come out and are arrested, and like I said, they eventually get out of jail and are not convicted of anything. So now, there's this discussion in the organization about what are we going to do? Are we going to continue serving these breakfasts? Are we going to continue giving away these free clothes? Are we going to continue giving out this free health care? Do we put the gun down? Because it's getting people shot at and killed and run out of the country and arrested. It's an issue. This disagreement is never resolved. But one of the guys who says, listen, we need to finish what we started. We said we were going to have a revolution to get our freedom by any means necessary. That's what we need to do. And there are lots of people in the Black Panther Party who feel the same way. And so remember I talked to you about those people going underground? He actually is going to become the leader. He and his wife, Kathleen, is actually going to become the leader of the underground apparatus of the Black Panther Party, and that underground apparatus is called the Black Liberation Army. And that's what they decide to do. They're going to continue to support the free breakfast programs, the free health clinics, and so on and so forth, by giving them money. And you say, well, where do they get the money from? Well, where is the money? The money's in the bank. So they go and rob a bunch of banks and almost never get caught. They probably rob, I've figured out now, it's about 123 different banks throughout the country that members of the Black Liberation Army rob, and now they're able to pay for lawyers, pay for food for these programs, pay for the medical supplies that's required. And you see there an image of Assata Shakur, A lot of times, if they get caught, which they usually do not, they escape from jail. I remember I talked to you about the whites who were very helpful with them. It's usually their white allies who are helping them to escape. And one of those white allies is one of the former SDS members of the Weather Underground, a woman named Marilyn Buck. She spent a lot of time here in Eugene. Turns out Eugene is a nice place to hide in the 1960s. You know, nobody's really going to be looking for you in Eugene. So you go and rob a bank and you come to Eugene. They look everywhere except Eugene, right? You got something nice going here, I tell you. So it was Marilyn Buck and some of her comrades who actually helped to spring Assata Shakur and so many other people from prison. So we're talking about really serious revolutionaries here. People who realize what they're up against and people who are willing to lay their lives on the line for their freedom and for their liberation. So I'll just give you one example of one of the more, let's say, unsavory operations that they attempt to pull off. And that is in San Francisco in 1971, about a week after the murder of George Jackson in San Quentin, members of the Black Liberation Army decide they want to retaliate against law enforcement. And so they go to the Ingleside police station in San Francisco. Somebody cuts a hole in the fence, and they sneak through the woods, go around the woods, and go into the police department and start shooting it up. And they're able to do this without too much trouble because prior to that happening, people say it was some people from the Weather Underground. I say people say because I'm looking at all of these documents in my research, and the people are law enforcement, say that members of the Weather Underground bombed the Stonestown branch of the Bank of America. And of course, you got a bank being bombed, what's gonna happen? The police are gonna show up. So the police leave the Ingleside police station and they go and check out this bank bombing. These people then come to Ingleside, go into the police station, and there's only a couple people left, right? They can't actually get to the rest of the police station because the last person at the door to go check out this bombing slams the door, and the door is still behemoth, and so they're trying to get it to open, and they shoot it a lot of times, and nothing happens. And so they actually turn from that door and stick a shotgun through the speaking hole where people did business with the police, and let off the shotgun in there, and that shotgun winds up killing Sergeant John Young of the San Francisco Police Department and wounding City Clerk Ellen Whitney. And the next day, they send this to the San Francisco Chronicle. They're basically saying, this is why that happened. And what we want is this to stop in our communities. We don't, I actually send a lot of communiques, but they're saying, we don't actually want to continue to do this. We want to negotiate. We want to talk about how we can actually get our freedom without engaging in these kinds of activities. But if you're not willing to go negotiate, these are the kinds of things that are going to keep happening until you do negotiate. And so it's hard and heavy. And what happens is all around the country, first in San Francisco, but then all around the country, the police actually start hiring guards to guard police stations. Because police officers really, they're writing tickets, they're getting cats out of trees, and you know, that they're not, like if a police officer kills somebody, it's not about I'm this big bad dude, right, or woman, and you know, I'm all well trained for that. But they realize that some people are well trained and they need to get other well trained people to get rid of them. So I'll just close because we have a guest with us tonight by saying that this person was one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles, and they're looking for him. And they eventually find him on a very dark street in Los Angeles, and he's with two of his comrades, John Bowman and Ray Boudreaux. And they're going around the LA community. They're looking for this guy who's got something for him. I think it's some weapons. You can ask him when he comes up here, right? I don't know if he'll tell you, but I think it's some weapons. And the police pull him over. And what happens is pandemonium. Is the aftermath of what you see on the image behind me. They say, you know, we need you to put your hands up on the steering wheel and on the back of the seat. They comply, but the police actually still shoot into the car. And once the police shoot into the car, they shoot back. And this gun battle goes on until they run out of bullets. The guy you're going to meet tonight is shot 6 times in this conflagration. The guy driving, Ray Boudreaux, is shot 7 times. The guy on the front seat, John Bowman, is shot twice in the back. And it's 9 o'clock when this happens, and I've seen the police registry. They get to the hospital at 11:14. So the idea, remember Freddie Gray, right? The idea is to drive around until they bleed to death, but they had a lot of blood, so they didn't actually die. And they too go to court. And guess what happens? They go to court and they're found not guilty. Why? Because a jury in Los Angeles says, well, the police actually gets on the stand and says, yeah, I shot him, right? And then the guy you're gonna meet tonight gets on the stand and says, yeah, I shot him, you know, but I shot him after he shot me. And so the jury is like, not guilty. And they get to go home. So I'm getting the signal that my time is out here. I've got about 15 minutes more of stuff up here, but I actually want to hear from you, and maybe you could ask me a couple of questions and I'll sneak in that 15 minutes, because one of the things I wanted to share with you was that in 2007, the guy you're gonna meet is actually arrested for that San Francisco police murder that I just told you about. In 2007. Right? January 23rd, 2007, all these years later, he and 7 other people are arrested, brought to California. He lived in Panama City at the time. This guy in the middle lives in New York City at the time. That guy up there, actually on the right, lives in San Francisco. And there are people all over the country they're picking up for this murder. Now, the same people were charged with this murder in 1973. The court throws it out. They're charged again in 1975. The court throws it out. And now they bring it back after 9/11. Ashcroft is in office. If you remember, during that period, there was all this information about torture in the news, right? Well, enhanced interrogation, right? Just ask them some more questions. And so they thought that they would have a chance to convict these guys, because what happens is they actually get arrested in New Orleans. Not they, but the guy on the picture there before I showed you, this young looking guy, Reuben Scott, he was arrested in New Orleans, tortured, and said whatever they told him to say, right? The guy you're gonna meet tonight was also arrested in New Orleans, tortured, and said what they told him to say. And they decided they were gonna use these coerced confessions to then get a conviction in 2007. And like I said, I've run out of time here. I wanna show you a really quick clip, but the long and short of it is that they were arrested in 2007. They refused to testify before the grand jury. They're thrown in jail. They're in jail almost a year on $13 million in bail. And so, you know, that's gonna be, a lot of people gotta put their pennies in the hat, right? And this is what happened. People come out of the woodwork. These old movement people, and I don't mean that pejoratively, but they were older than me, came out. It's like, we will support this issue. And they put up their houses, they donated, they invited them to their universities, and they talked about this. And in 2011, a California court kicked these charges out. And so just as a way of introducing you to this individual, I want to show a really quick clip that kind of gives you a sense of what happens to them in New Orleans.
In the 60s and 70s, particularly against the Black Panther Party, beatings and interrogation, forms of torture were being used against members of the Black Panther Party primarily. And what happened in 1973 in New Orleans is one example.
All during the time this was taking place, I can hear John Bowman in another room where he was hollering, and you could hear the licks being passed. They took what they call a slapjack. It's like a little short blackjack. And they started working the back of my neck, my shoulders. Then one would get down and he'd work my shins and between my knees. They would beat me like that. They did that. I don't know, it seemed like it was hours, but it could have been 30 minutes, could have been an hour, could have been 2 hours, I don't know. It's back again with the plastic bag. This time they had a blanket. I don't know what they soaked it in, but it was really, really hot. And they just covered me with that blanket and put that plastic bag over my head. And I couldn't scream, I couldn't holler, I couldn't get my hands up to poke a hole in the bag because I was handcuffed to the chair and my legs were tied to the chair. And they kicked the chair over and let me just suffocate. I was just about to pass out. They'd snatch it off, spit in my face. They left me sitting there for a little while. McCoy and Erlax, they started asking me questions. And I had no knowledge of the things they were asking me, so I couldn't answer them, you know. So they said, well, they turned off the recorder and whatever they had and said, we'll tell you what happened. And then after we tell you, this is what we want you to say.
So I did make statements. I did waive my rights to an attorney, which means I waived my Miranda rights. I did all of this because of the physical aggression and the brutality that was being put upon my body.
One got behind me and he took his hands and he slapped them like that over my ears. I couldn't hear nothing. My ears were just ringing so bad. I could feel the fluid running down my side of my face. And they were talking to me, but I couldn't hear them. All I could hear was ringing. Whenever they stood me up to make me walk, I couldn't walk. They had to just kind of just carry me back into the other room. And when they get me back in there, they start again. And they'd beat, and they'd beat, they'd beat, and then Erlax, McCoy would come back in, and they would kind of grin and laugh. They were all laughing. They thought it was a lot of fun, and I was a big joke. They started asking me questions, so I started talking to them, doing just like I followed their whole script. Everything they told me to say, I said it just like whatever Reuben told them, I repeated what Reuben said. So they said, well, we got what we want.
So that's kind of the long and short of it. And I want to introduce you to this guy, but there was torture involved in the case. And there was no way for the court to legitimately get around it. So they kicked the charges out in the 70s, and in 2011 of September, they kicked the charges out, and the San Francisco 8, which is what they're actually known as, were set free, and they went around the country telling young people the story. And the thing they were trying to get across to young people is that even though the Black Panther Party was called Black and then Panther Party, it was much more about the people, and not just Black people. It's about all people, poor people, rich people. I mean, you had Jane Fonda, Marlon Brando, Donald Sutherland giving the Panthers millions of dollars. So it wasn't about, it was like the haves and the have-nots, but the haves actually supported the party, and that was a problem. That's where the whole idea of power to the people was from. And that's why they were the greatest threat, because they were looking to dismantle the status quo. So I've gone long, and I want to thank you for indulging me. I really.
Harold Taylor was one of the first people to join the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles. He established Black Panther chapters in California, began free breakfast programs, and taught political education classes. He has suffered from police brutality and torture. Although he has been arrested many times, he has never been convicted of a felony. He continues to serve his community by speaking to young people about the Black freedom struggle and his experiences with the Black Panther Party.
Torture is a life sentence. You never get over it, you live it forever. I I still suffer with nightmares from a number of different events and times that I participated in. But I'm not afraid to say what I want to say and what needs to be said, that dare to struggle, dare to win. And that I put everything before myself and my personal needs, because my love for my people and people in general and all oppressed people, I struggle in the behalf of all people, no particular individuals, but anybody that's exploited in this country or in the world. I'm in support of the underdog. Your enemy is my enemy. I was fortunate enough to come up at a time to meet Bunchy Carter when I was standing on a corner with my homies, drinking wine and not doing nothing, with my life. And Bunchy was well known throughout our community as a leader. He was head of the Renegades of Slauson Village, which was the biggest gang in Los Angeles at the time. Well, we didn't fight each other with guns, we fought each other with fisticuffs. And we all went home at night and all come back in the morning and drink that wine and do what we've been doing. But still, Bunchy wanted to know what we were doing, and we told him, and he said, well, you're wasting time. You want to do something, get productive, and check out the baddest gang in the world, which is the Los Angeles Police Department. They run this. This is not your hood. This is their hood. They're an occupying army, and you're peasants. And this is what they do with peasants. And he pointed out things that we never really looked at before, and me always being mischievous, challenging authority. I've been through the juvenile centers, but I've never been to prison in my life. And I've been numerous occasions arrested. I've been beaten by every police station in Los Angeles. I've been drugging it. I knew the procedure. When they arrest me, I put my hands not on my head. I put them behind my neck and get on the ground and get in a fetus position, because I know what's going to happen. And they would kick me to sleep, and they would kick me awake. And so when the Black Panther Party came in '67, in 67 for Los Angeles, I said, this is what I've been looking for. I was really, my uncles were identical twins, and they were Garveyites. And I met Malcolm X when I was just a kid. My uncle took me to the Nation of Islam on Broadway. When Malcolm came through there, I thought he was the tallest man I ever seen in my life. And he was pat us all on the head and told us how we were beautiful young black people and how important we were to our own people and for us to strive to provide for our people. My uncles would teach me stuff like that. And yes, I'm from Louisiana. Originally, my people are. And the majority of people in the Black Panther Party at that time came from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, from the South. My father fought I would say somebody in my family has fought in every war this country's ever had, okay? My uncles fought in Korea, my father fought in World War I, my grandfather fought in my father fought World War II, my grandfather fought in World War I, and so forth and so on. I never fought none of them, but the Black Panther Party. My brother served in Vietnam. I didn't have to go to Vietnam because my brother was already there and they wouldn't take but one from a family in the draft. But they didn't want me anyway because they found out I was a Black Panther and they figured I'd be a part of a fifth column. If you don't know what a fifth column is, that's somebody that would jump sides and be on the other side, which I probably would have done, So I never made it into Vietnam and wasn't planning on going anyway because I told my mom, she said, you got these papers in the mail and you need to go downtown on Flower Street and register for the draft because you gotta go. I told them if they catch me, they just have to take me to prison because I'm not going. I learned that from Muhammad Ali. I took a stand. I followed the examples of my elders and the ones whose shoulders I stood upon to be here today. That means from the women of like Harriet Tubman, Sonja Truth, these are my inspirations in life. And a lot of things a lot of people didn't know about the Black Panther Party. In order to be a true Panther at the time, you had to go through a 6-week training program, same as they did in the Army, which meant you had to go to a political education classes. You had to spend 2 hours a day reading a list of different books that Bunchy Carter would assign, and he would want a book report. If not, there was discipline to come. If you like running, you had to run that block maybe 20 times until you learned what you were supposed to learn and know the 10-point program and be able to recite it, because you couldn't go through the community organizing without knowing that, because he was staunch on things to that effect. If you're going to be a member of the Black Panther Party, you got to be able to represent the Black Panther Party and explain to the people in the community why you're here and what we're about. We just didn't let anybody join the party at that time. But there was very little infiltration. But I organized out of a branch in Los Angeles. Matter of fact, it was the first branch from the chapter of the LA chapter, which was on 84th and Broadway, was down the street from my house. All my homies that I grew up with all joined the party with me. Matter of fact, I'm going to bury one of them tomorrow. But anyway, I joined the party, and I saw when the split came into the party, when you had Eagles got in the way, infiltrators infiltrated the party, you had agents and provocateurs everywhere in the party, and a split was created and division was created, and before things got to the point where they were going to start killing each other, I left. I left with a group of different members of the party, and if you ever get a chance to read the 10-point program or the rules of the party, you'll see in there that you can join no other organization other than the Black Liberation Army. So when the split came in the party, I didn't sign up to kill black people. I signed up to fight the enemy. So when the split came, instead of going to go kill each other, I left the party and left with the Black Liberation Army. And our code was to take care of the community and make sure that the survival programs that we put in place stayed in place and remained productive, and to be a protector of my community. Curtis pointed out a lot of bank robberies. My specialty was robbing dope pushers. And I didn't sell newspapers, I gave them away. And I went and got the money from the dope pushers. And I charged them a toll for being in that community, and I let them know that they couldn't sell dope in my community anymore. Purse snatchers from the elderly, can't do that no more. You got to move out of this community. The parks where you're hanging out at, where the kids play, can't do that no more. You got to leave. And to the police department, we also made it clear to them, we're not afraid of you. We're not afraid of you. And we didn't threaten them. We just let them know, we're not afraid of you. Well, that made me a target. I organized chapters and branches and breakfast programs all up and down the state of California and some other cities. I won't name everything because I don't want to be put in a precarious situation where they would suggest that that particular time in that area, this happened. Were you there? No. And the question that Curtis said you might want to answer, I can answer now, no. Okay? I give you nothing to fight me with. I give you nothing on me. And you do your job. I'm not going to help you do your job against my people and oppressed people. I'm not going to aid you in any way. I'm not going to turn on my people. I'm not going to turn on my comrades. And I'm not lying on nobody for you. I was clear about that. That's why my knees are bad today. That's why, Curtis, you set me up. I'm sorry. But, you know, I had numerous different occasions where I had the opportunity to meet some great people. Curtis is probably going to tell you, but I got a story to tell you about Eugene, Oregon. This is like my home in many ways, but I've never been here before. Okay?
Can you tell us about the Eugene Black Panther Party?
No. I'm going to tell you about a sister friend of mine, Marilyn Buck. She made identification for us underground, her and a group of other sisters. They're black, white, Indian, all nationalities. We were a coalition of revolutionaries. We didn't, if you had a contribution to make, we used you in that resource. We never believed in taking anybody out of their element. Whatever you were good at, we didn't take you away from it. If you were a good teacher, we let you teach. We wanted you to teach. All right, if you were a good person that robbed dope people, that's what we wanted you to do, you know. Okay, the Eugene story. Well, in New Orleans, when I was arrested and captured down there, they asked me my name, and I told them my name was Eugene. And they said, well, where are you from, Eugene? I said, Eugene, Oregon. Marilyn Buck set me up. She gave me that identification knowing I'd never been here. And my name was, well, you know, it's against the law to lie down about who you are. Eugene Martin, no. Eugene Martin was my name on identification, but my other name was Marvin McIntyre, okay? She said a word to us. We didn't have cell phones and stuff, so we would have to drive for miles out of state to make phone calls, okay? And we had to designate timing and everything so we could be where on our spot and be on time. None of that colored folks' time. You had to be on time to get your phone call, to get your marching orders. And she called and let me know that the identification for the place where they were making it got raided. They found all the identification they was looking for Martin McIntyre. So she says, here's your new identification. You're now Eugene Martin from Eugene, Oregon. Okay, when I got arrested in New Orleans, they were going for it. They was gonna let me go. They said, you know what, you were running with some bad people. We'll let you go. But there's one FBI agent, he must have walked down the hallway and he came back and he opened the door, he says, Eugene Martin from Eugene, Oregon. Hey man, come on, you could do better than that. I almost laughed when he said it, but I didn't. But he just shook his head. He says, you're gonna sit a little while longer. When they came back and found out who I really was, they put the full court press on me because they were scared because they almost let me go. They thought I was Herman Bell. In case you don't know who Herman Bell is, he was one of the San Francisco 8, and he's been in prison since 1972. He's been in there for a total of almost 46 years now. Him and Jalil. And there's so many of us that's still alive. The ones that's alive that I grew up with and came to the party with are either mostly dead or still in prison. Romaine Chip Fitzgerald, he's been in prison since 1969. He was from my neighborhood, come from the same chapter I came from. And he still calls me today on the phone. He sat in prison and watched his whole family die off. And he has nobody left but his sister, me, and a few other comrades that's still alive. So I'm probably one of the chosen few, but it's a golden opportunity for me to be here and speak to you, because these are the things that I do in my life now. I work for the people, I'm a servant of the people, I am truly a revolutionary, and that's the way I plan on leaving this planet. And so,
I don't know where we are in terms of time, or perhaps we have a question for Mr. Taylor or about the talk, and we'll just go until they kick us out. How about that? And we have to allow ourselves to kick out. Okay. Anybody want to ask a question? Okay, thank you.
So I've been wondering in the timing between sort of the Watts uprising and the founding of the chapter in Los Angeles. Is there a relationship between those two things? Did people feel kind of galvanized after the Watts uprising that we really need to like take over this situation and do something?
Well, you know, I happened to be there at the time of the Watts riot. I lived in Watts. I was raised in Watts. I took Curtis through my old neighborhood, showed him where I grew up at. I hadn't been in that neighborhood in almost 45 years, but everything was there like I always saw it was. But as far as the Watts riot was concerned, well, it solidified a lot of things for people in the black community. At that time, that's when the US organization was formed. That was 1965 in August. Malcolm X was killed in January that year. And that's when the US organization came together and created the US organization. And they were recruiting young men like me. Matter of fact, the people that killed Bunchy, I knew them. I grew up with them. I was in camp with the guy that did the shooting. They used to try to recruit me to come into the US organization. But I didn't do it because I'm not a nationalist. I'm an internationalist and I'm a revolutionary. And I didn't separate myself from the people. All people needed representation, and I didn't want to just say black people needed it more than anybody else, but I am black and I represent my people, and I fight in their behalf. Okay, so I saw the need for me to participate in that, and yes, it galvanized a lot of things in the black community. It made us all think about, we need to form something. And then right after the Watts riot in '66, that's when the Black Panther Party came about. That's when I started looking at them. And I saw them talking some real deal stuff. And I said, them the cats I want to hang with. You know, so when I joined the party, when Bunchy came to me in '67, talking about it along with the Freeman boys and these other brothers, I decided that I was going to join the Black Panther Party. And there was the Black Panther Party for self-defense. That was my Black Panther Party. And I'll always be a Panther until we achieve our necessary goals and until the needs of the 10-point program is met. We want land, bread, housing, education, justice, and peace. That was the basic principles and the foundation of why I joined the Black Panther Party. Don't get quiet on me now.
We have one in the back here.
I'm wondering, how much are Black Panther members aware of and studying movements in other countries?
Oh.
So I'm thinking about, I mean, in the 60s and the 70s, there was a lot of leftist activity in South America and Latin America. Big things going on in Mexico. The IRA was getting hot again in Ireland.
The group of models in South America, they was really popular with us. Fidel Castro was popular with us, along with numerous other. Ho Chi Minh, General Von Giap was my heroes. You know, those are the cats I worship. Those are my heroes because they basically honored and respected the Constitution of the United States. All they wanted was democracy. We got the best thing in the world going for us on paper, but we failed to practice it. And that's what we wanted to bring out in the community, to practice what you preach. I'm a realist. I don't play games with myself, and I don't play games with my life, and I don't play games with other people's lives. I knew that this was a real deal. I knew the night they shot me up, shot me in that car. They shot in that car over 250 times. They drugged me out. They beat me. They stomped a bullet out of my leg. They shot me in the head. I get migraines today. I dream about being in that car. I dream about the beatings in New Orleans. I dream about being taken from my kids and destroying my life and my marriage and my job in Florida 30 years later and drag me off to prison, drag me off to jail in San Francisco to spend a year in there. And my thing is, I'm not going to help you oppress me or anybody else. I'm against exploitation and oppression. And that's what I'm here for, to let you guys know that. And there's no shame in that game. You know, no shame at all. You know, all you got to do is represent.
Restaurants are open till 9.
Okay, we have one down here, and I see a hand back there.
Only one.
And then we'll
There's beer and some time.
Okay. So, your question, and then we'll come back to you.
I grew up in Los Angeles in the time that
Yankee, yeah. I sold a lot of newspapers in that area.
Yeah. Panther office in
Yeah.
Western Avenue.
Okay.
What would you tell the youth of today in terms of recommendations?
I tell you, you live by examples, and you always got to check yourself before you make a move, and always consider what you've learned from your elders, and be respectful, and be fearless. Don't back up. Take a position and develop some principles and live by them. That's one thing I will do. I will never violate my principles. My principle is my core, okay? If certain things I will do and certain things I'm not going to do. I mean, I never thought nobody could make me lie on my comrades or do anything to make me persecute myself or anybody else. I never thought that would happen, but I know that pain is a superior move, and anybody who says that it doesn't hurt is telling you a lie. But I would say to kids, you dare to struggle, you dare to win. You got to have the fortitude and do your research and do your investigation. It's an old thing of saying no investigation, no right to speak on that subject. So you need to do your research and do it diligently. And also, if you see a good fight pertaining to a struggle or what's happening in your community, get involved, get in it. I learned that from my grandfather. He says, get in it. It is a good fight to fight for other people and their rights. Get involved. I love what those kids in Florida are doing. They are standing up. They're standing up. They have a voice, and they're standing on a platform that's basically, they saw what happened to these other schools back in the past, and they made up their mind. Never again. It's not going to happen no more here if we could do something about it and have something to do about it. That's what the Black Panther, we were young, man. I was 19 years old. You know, I just come out of high school just a couple of years before then. And I was, next thing I know, they got me running a chapter in Los Angeles, going across different cities, organizing breakfast programs, having political education classes. And then next thing I know, I'm shot up in a car. I'm being beaten. Then I get arrested again, and I get arrested. I mean, you look at my rap sheet, you think I should be under the penitentiary. But I've never been convicted of a felony. You know, I don't go to prison because I do just things. And I fight, and I tell you one thing I always tell kids. When they tell you you have the right to remain silent, do that. You know? You do that. You know, because you are not going to explain your way out of shit with them. You know? Their job is not to help you. Their job is to arrest you. You know, you're just a piece of meat to them. And once they get through using you, like informants, they kick them to the curb. They throw them out there to the wolves. I mean, that's what they do. You know, they have no remorse for what they do. So when they tell you have the right to remain silent, you just tell them, am I under arrest? If he says, no, we just want to talk, you tell them I got other things to do. I need to leave. And if they persist, you say, well, you said you'd get me a lawyer. I mean, I'm waiting on him because I don't have nothing to talk to you about. That's what kids need to learn. The police are not your friend. They want you to think that. They think you think you're being a good Samaritan by telling on your neighbor? Well, it all depends on what your neighbor did.
Thank you for being here. I was wondering specifically in terms of the work you did working with communities and community organizing. What did you think was most challenging as you were starting out with that? And what advice?
You know, it's the kids. You know, because, you know, I had an experience with Curtis in Mississippi when he was teaching there. And I worked on a breakfast program in San Diego. And I was talking, and this lady got up and she came over to me. She said, I know you, you know. I said, no, ma'am, I'm not sure about that. She said, yeah, you used to serve breakfast in San Diego back in '69, and I was a little girl, and I ate at that breakfast. And that right there, that just killed me. You know, I said, wow, that is so cool. And she said, when I heard that you was going to be here, I had to be here to thank you for those pancakes, those eggs, and that sausage. But, you know, that's a reward to me, you know, just knowing that I had that effect on her life, and she was able to go back to school, went to college, you know, and probably graduated and got her own children now, you know. But that right there was something that was rewarding to me to know that I made that contribution. Is that good or bad?